The great hall of infinite stars gleamed under a sky of swirling nebulae and pulsating quasars, a place where time itself seemed to bend and stretch. This sacred arena, located in the heart of the Centauri convergence, was a marvel of ancient engineering. Its massive interlocking rings of obsidian stone encircled the central stage, where cosmic warriors from across the galaxy would prove their worth in celestial gauntlet, a tournament of unimaginable stakes. The atmosphere buzzed with electric excitement, the energy palpable as thousands of spectators, each from a different corner of the galaxy, gathered to witness the event. Spectators glowed, hummed, or radiated energy as they communicated with no need for sound. The air filled with the telepathic echoes of the crowd. Ritherids, tentacle beings that slithered through the air, their semi-transparent bodies shimmering like smoke, floated above the crowd. Their luminous eyes scanned the arena, calculating the arrival of the next competitor. Among them, the Trilumi, a species of floating bioluminescent spheres, pulsed in rhythmic unison, their glowing lights flickering in mesmerizing patterns. Meanwhile, towering Kele Garrets, with skin like living stone and eyes like burning embers, stood silently at the back of the grand hall, their sheer size and formidable presence commanding respect. They communicated in low-frequency vibrations that resonated to the walls of the arena, sending waves of power across the ground. At the center, a Venerian elder, a being of pure energy wrapped in an elegant gown of star matter, began the ceremony. The atmosphere grew thick with anticipation as the celestial beings, their forms as vast as the universe itself, bowed in reverence. The gauntlet was about to begin, but then an anomaly. From beyond the known stars, a singular human being, a lone representative of the blue planet Earth, stepped into the center of the arena, with his eyes burning with the quiet strength of a species still young but fiercely resilient. He faced the galaxy's mightiest contenders. A ripple of confusion ran through the crowd. The human was insignificant in size, a speck compared to the ancient species gathered, yet the energy around him hummed differently, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The first round of the celestial gauntlet was about to unfold, and no one, not even the galaxy's oldest civilizations, could predict what this human's presence would ignite. I am the shadow of towering cosmic beings and ancient warriors. Ethan Hayes, the lone human from Earth, stood out like a pebble in a sea of mountains. Clad in an old, faded Earth soccer jersey and sweatpants that had seen better days, he looked completely out of place among the galaxy's finest competitors. His sneakers, scuffed and worn, didn't match the high-tech boots or shimmering armor of his fellow contestants. And to top it all off, he was casually sipping from a thermo flask that read, "Best Dad Ever," in bold red letters, a gift from his daughter back on Earth. While his fellow competitors, beings of immense power and sophistication, focused intently on their pre-battle rituals, Ethan was more concerned with finding the best snack in the prep area. As a Zenther warrior practiced levitation drills in the corner, Ethan was rummaging through a series of alien vending machines, muttering to himself, "Ugh, no coffee, but hey, they've got protein bars." The other competitors shot curious glances at him. A Thalnix sent out waves of deep confusion, its tentacles curling in perplexity, while a towering Kele Garrett regarded him with what could only be interpreted as a low-frequency grunt of disbelief. Ethan, oblivious to the growing stares, popped open a protein bar with an exaggerated grunt. Not bad for alien food," he muttered as he tossed a wrapper to the side. The Venerian elder, overseeing the preparations, glanced down at the human, his radiant form pulsing slightly with concern. "Does he truly believe he stands a chance?" he mused in an unspoken thought that rippled through the arena's energy field. Meanwhile, Ethan finished his snack, wiped his hands on his shirt, and turned to the nearest Ritherid with a friendly grin. "Hey, any chance there's a gym nearby? Need to stretch out before I show these guys what Earth's made of." The alien just stared, its tendrils twitching as it processed a strange display. Ethan Hayes didn't have the galaxy's strength or ancient wisdom, but he had something else, a stubborn, laid-back confidence that made him impossible to read, and even harder to predict. If anything, he was a walking paradox, a wild card from a backwater planet with nothing to prove but everything to gain. And for once, the galaxy was starting to realize they had underestimated him. The celestial gauntlet had begun, and already, The Venerian elder's voice echoed throughout the arena, his tones amplified by the telepathic resonance of the venue. Competitors, prepare yourselves. The first trial shall begin, an ancient test of strength and will. The crowd fell silent, their combined energy field humming in anticipation. Every eye was on the arena, but one set of eyes glowed brighter than all others. Karga the Eternal, the undefeated champion of Celestial Gauntlet for over 300 years. His reputation was legendary across the cosmos, a being of unparalleled strength, with a command of ancient energy techniques passed down through countless generations. The Kele Gareth, his rocky body towering at over 7 meters tall, stood with the kind of poise that only centuries of mastery could provide. His dark, molten eyes surveyed the competition with a glance that seemed to say, "None of you stand a chance." With each calculated movement, Karga exuded an aura of power. His stone-like skin was etched with the scars of countless battles, and his weapons, ceremonial gauntlets forged in the heart of a dying star, glowed with an energy that sent waves of pressure across the arena. He had trained a millennia in the ways of the ancient warriors, following traditions and rules laid down by the Council of Elders. Across from him, standing alone, was Ethan Hayes, human untrained and vastly outmatched. As Karga surveyed the battlefield, his attention briefly shifted to Ethan, who was still fiddling with his flask, completely oblivious to the grave importance of the moment. The Venerian elder stepped forward, raising his hands to address the crowd. The odds are clear. Kargith, the undefeated champion, faces an unknown entity from the distant world of Earth. The betters have declared this battle an impossibility. The elder's energy flickered as he spoke, an uneasy tension threading through his thoughts. Ethan looked around the arena, his fingers tapping absently on the flask. The alien crowd's silent judgment weighed heavily in the air, but he didn't care. He wasn't here to prove anything to them. He was here because he was bored. As the battle began, the arena's artificial sun blazed alive, casting long shadows across the warriors. Kargith raised his gauntlet, his voice like thunder as he issued a challenge. Prepare to witness the old ways, the ways that have never failed me. Ethan, still half smiling, stepped forward and stretched. Old ways? Oh man, I hope this isn't like one of those old school, prepare to lose your soul kind of deals, he said, his tone casual as ever. I just want to get through this without breaking a sweat. The crowd gasped. To them, Ethan's words were blasphemy. To Kargith, they were an insult. His molten eyes narrowed, and the energy around him intensified. The odds were stacked heavily against Ethan, his chances of survival almost non-existent. The Celestial Gauntlet was designed to test the finest warriors, and no one, not even the greatest minds of the galaxy, believed a human had any place in this contest. But the truth was, the old ways didn't take into account humans, and Ethan Hayes was about to rewrite the rules. This sets up the main challenge. Ethan's fight against Kargith, the undefeated champion, showcasing the vast difference in their experience and abilities. The tension builds as the odds seem impossible, yet Ethan's laid-back confidence hints that there may be more to him than meets the eye. The Celestial Gauntlet had just begun, but instead of preparing in traditional ways of the galaxy's elite warriors, Ethan Hayes was stretching in a way that made even the most experienced combatants blink in confusion. A Kele Gareth warrior, whose stone-like body rippled with ancient power, turned to a fellow competitor and grunted in low frequencies. What is he doing? Is this preparation? Ethan, in the middle of a series of odd stretches, pulled one leg up behind his head, then gave an exaggerated groan. Yeah, feels like a real deep stretch, right? He muttered to himself. Need to keep these hamstrings limber for whatever crazy stuff they throw at me. Next, he dropped into a deep squat, his hands clasped in front of him, looking like he was trying to balance on a bouncy ball. All right, Ethan, you've got this. Just got to channel that inner warrior, or, whatever it is these guys do, he said out loud, clearly unaware of the stares he was receiving from the Silteri, an ethereal race of energy beings who flickered with color as they watched in unison. A Thalnix floated past, its many translucent tentacles swaying in the air. What is he doing? It asked, sending waves of confusion through its form. Ethan, hearing the question, gave a wide grin and casually waved. Oh, just some earth stuff. Yoga, stretching. getting the blood flowing, all that jazz. You should try it sometime. He popped a finger to his lips thoughtfully. I mean, maybe not the weird finger stretches, but the rest is pretty cool. The Zenther next to him, a being made of pure light, gently pulsated in what Ethan could only guess was amusement. We have never seen this ritual. It sent telepathically, its voice a shimmering vibration. Well, Ethan shrugged, pushing his palms to the floor and tipping over into a forward roll. Sometimes the best preparation is just being yourself. He hopped up, dusting off his pants with a grin. I've seen way worse stretches at my local gym. Meanwhile, Erythrid, its semi-transparent body floating by, twitched in what might have been mild amusement. This human is strange, it communicated to its companions, who only responded with a puzzled hum. But Ethan was undeterred. With a deep breath, he clapped his hands together and looked toward the horizon. All right, guess it's go time. But first, anyone know where I can get some real coffee around here? The crowd went silent for a moment, processing this absurdity. Then, the Venerian elder, watching from the sidelines, sent a rippling wave of thought. This human does not fit the profile, the elder mused. Yet something about him feels unpredictable. His radiant form flickered in what seemed like an involuntary gesture of amusement, or perhaps irritation. Ethan, still oblivious of mounting tension, grabbed his thermal flask, took a swig, and then with a nonchalant shrug, added, I might just go in there, stretch a bit, throw some punches, and see what happens. Can't be worse than Monday mornings at my office job back home. This scene shows Ethan's quirky, unpredictable approach to preparation, his humor, and how it contrasts with the serious, intense demeanor of the galaxy's finest warriors. It also emphasizes how his casual attitude both confuses and amuses the other competitors, setting the stage for more memorable moments. The celestial gauntlet was heating up. The first round of matches had proven to be a spectacle of power and prestige, each contestant showcasing their unique abilities in a series of grueling trials. And somehow, against all odds, Ethan Hayes was still standing. The first match was against a creature called a Crexian, a being made entirely of liquid metal. It moved like quicksilver, shape-shifting in and out of dangerous forms with ease. The crowd watched, expecting the fight to be over in mere seconds. Crexians were known to be unbeatable in hand-to-hand combat. Their ability to morph into blades, spikes, and shields made them a living nightmare in battle. Ethan, however, approached the fight with an air of utter indifference. As Crexian turned into a large spike hammer and swung at Ethan, he simply sidestepped the attack with a casual roll. The metallic monstrosity tried again, but this time, Ethan stood still, raising his hands as if inviting the attack. "What is this human doing?" a Spheronid whispered, its jellyfish-like tendrils trembling in confusion. Ethan didn't flinch. Instead, as the hammer swung toward him, he grabbed a handful of pebbles from the ground and tossed them in Crexian's path. The liquid metal paused midair, momentarily distracted by the objects that made an odd, tinkling sound on contact. A few moments passed, enough for Ethan to grab the small laser pointer he had found earlier in the arena and aim it straight at Crexian's shimmering core. The Crexian froze, its form rippling in confusion as the red from the pointer danced across its surface. Ethan grinned, giving the alien a playful wink. "Bet you didn't see that coming, huh?" he said. Then, with a swift, completely unceremonious kick, he sent the metallic creature tumbling out of bounds. The crowd gasped. The Crexian's defeat was so casual, it left the galaxy's finest warriors in stunned silence. The Venerian elder, still floating at the edge of the arena, whispered to himself, "This human, he's defying all known tactics." The second match was against a Zenther, a crystalline being whose entire body could shift into various forms of energy, capable of refracting light, and using it as a weapon. As the Zenther moved, a blinding beam of energy shot toward Ethan, designed to disintegrate anything in its path. The crowd leaned forward, certain this was the end for Ethan. But Ethan, with the same unconcerned grin, raised his hands in mock surrender. "Whoa! Buddy! Slow down there," he shouted, then pulled out a small reflective mirror he had found in the prep room. "Let's see if we can work this out the old-fashioned way." He angled the mirror in such a way that the beam of pure energy bounced back toward the Zenther, hitting the being square in the chest. The crystal warrior shattered into 1,000 tiny shards, disqualified for using excessive force against an opponent. "Just a little mirror trick," Ethan said as he dusted off his hands. "Nothing fancy." A Varen, watching from the sidelines, blinked in disbelief. This human, does he not understand the ancient ways? The Zenta was meant to be undefeated. The crowd was starting to catch on. Ethan wasn't here to follow the rules. He was here to bend them. In the final match in preliminary rounds, Ethan faced a Thalnix, a sentient, octopus-like being whose psychic abilities could manipulate the minds of its opponents, controlling their movements with a mere thought. The Thalnix floated in the air, its many eyes focused on Ethan as it prepared to take control. "All right, let's see how well you can mess with my head, huh?" Ethan muttered, casually hopping from one foot to the other. The Thalnix's psychic wave hit, crashing into Ethan's mind like a tidal wave. For a moment he faltered, his body seizing. The audience collectively held its breath. But then Ethan started singing. "If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. Bada 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 boom." The Thalnix hesitated, its psychic grip faltering. The mental waves were disturbed by the loud, off-key singing coming from Ethan's mouth. His casual demeanor was completely undermining the Thalnix's complex psychic attack. The spheronid in the stands blinked its pulsating lights rapidly in what could have been laughter. The KLA Garretts exchanged confused glances. In the end, the Thalnix, overwhelmed by the bizarre disruption, lost its focus. Ethan took advantage of the lapse, diving to the ground and rolling out of the way of the Thalnix's next mental assault. With a well-timed swipe, he knocked the alien off its psychic pedestal and out of bounds. "Classic Earth technique," Ethan said, cracking his knuckles. "Works every time." These initial matches set up the tension and showcased Ethan's unconventional methods, using quirky tools, offbeat humor, and completely untraditional strategies to triumph over highly skilled opponents. Each victory becomes a testament to his ability to disrupt the expected, leaving the audience and his enemies alike baffled, amused, and, most importantly, unprepared for what he'll do next. Kargat the Eternal stood alone in the shadows, watching the holographic feeds of Ethan Hayes' previous matches. The arena around him was silent, as if the very fabric of space held its breath, waiting for the inevitable. But the more Kargat observed, the more unsettled he became. The first feed flickered to life, showing Ethan defeating the Crexian, the liquid metal creature. Kargat had watched the moment unfold in real time, but seeing it again, isolated in the stillness of his chamber, gave him new clarity. Ethan had simply sidestepped the Crexian's hammer-like form, almost lazily, as if the danger had been nothing more than an inconvenience. And then, with the most absurd distraction, a laser pointer, he'd ended the match. Kargat's molten eyes narrowed, the embers within flickering with frustration. He had faced hundreds of opponents, each one following the ancient rules of battle, each one respectful of tradition. They fought with honor, skill, and the weight of generations of warriors. But Ethan was different. The human wasn't fighting the way it was meant to be fought. He wasn't following the ways of the ancients. "This human is unpredictable," Kargat muttered under his breath, his voice like the grinding of tectonic plates. The thought of his opponents behaving this way, disrupting the sacred rituals of battle, was nearly unbearable. He watched again as Ethan squared off against the Zenter. The crystalline being, an entity of pure energy, was a formidable adversary, capable of refracting light and turning it into weapons of mass destruction. Kargat had always known that only the finest, most disciplined warriors could face the Zenter and survive. Yet, once again, Ethan defied the rules. Instead of engaging in combat or even attempting to learn the intricacies of energy manipulation, he'd simply used a mirror, a crude, almost childish tool, and turned the Zenter's own attack against it. "No respect for tradition," Kargat growled, his massive hands gripping the armrests of his throne. "He fights like a child, yet somehow he wins." A wave of irritation washed over Kargat. In the vastness of space, combat had always been a matter of honor, a sacred ritual passed down through the millennia. His own people, the KLA Garrett, had lived by the principles of their ancestors: strength, endurance, and a mastery of ancient techniques. The idea that this earthling, this strange, unworthy opponent, could succeed without adhering to any of it was incomprehensible. The final match against the Thalnix, the psychic entity, played out on the screen. Kargath had been certain this would be the end of Ethan. The Thalnix's psychic abilities were not only powerful, they were feared across the galaxy for their ability to crush the will of any foe. And yet, Ethan had some. Kargath's eyes flickered with a new kind of realization. The Thalnix, distracted by the human's chaotic behavior, had faltered. The human had disoriented his opponent with something as basic as a song. This human, he is not breaking the rules, Kargath murmured, his voice trembling with a mix of bewilderment and frustration. He is breaking the game. For the first time in centuries, Kargath felt a sense of unease. He had battled gods, champions, and countless opponents from across the universe. He had studied every form of combat, every tactic, every weapon, every tradition. But this was new. Ethan Hayes wasn't playing by the rules. He wasn't even playing the same game. The more Kargath thought about it, the more the realization took root. This human was a threat not because he was stronger, smarter, or more skilled. He was a threat because he didn't care about any of those things. He was completely unpredictable, and that made him dangerous in a way Kargath had never encountered. Kargath stood up, towering over the holograms as they flickered into silence. "I will teach him the true meaning of combat," he declared, his voice resonating through the chamber. "But not in the way I've taught the others. I will destroy his chaos and restore order to this tournament." But even as he spoke the words, a doubt flickered in the back of his mind. Could the old ways defeat something so unconventional? The battle was no longer just about victory. It was about proving that tradition, the ancient, unbroken way, was still the strongest force in the galaxy. And Kargath was about to learn that unpredictability had its own form of power. This shift in perspective delves into Kargath's frustration and growing awareness that Ethan's unpredictability might be his greatest strength. It adds depth to Kargath's character, showing his commitment to tradition and his internal conflict as he begins to see Ethan not just as an annoyance, but as a true threat. The celestial gauntlet was nearing its conclusion. The final rounds were about to begin, and the tension in the arena had reached a fever pitch. The once holy tournament grounds, where only the galaxy's greatest warriors had stepped foot, now felt uncertain. Ethan Hayes, the human who had somehow defied every conventional method of combat, stood on the cusp of the final battle. The odds had been stacked against him since the first day, and yet, somehow, he was still here. In the stands, the crowd had grown uneasy. As Ethan moved toward the semifinals, the atmosphere buzzed with whispers, skepticism, and awe. Some still viewed him as an anomaly, a joke, a human who had somehow managed to get past elite corrections, Zenthers, and Thalnix without following proper procedures, the ancient rituals that made those warriors who they were. Yet, for the first time, the betting markets were no longer certain. As the odds shifted, the digital signs above the arena flickered, showing the dreaded words. Error. Does not compute. The Sphäronids, an entire race of hyper-intelligent beings, whisper among themselves, their light flickering erratically. How can this be? How can a human, someone who does not even understand the ways of combat, get this far? One of them asked, its tentacles twisting in confusion. Kargath the Eternal, seated in his throne-like chamber high above the arena, studied the feeds once again. He was no longer sure what to make of Ethan's victory. In his mind, combat had always been simple. Strength, skill, tradition. There was no place for chaos. Yet, as he looked at the human's unorthodox methods, he felt something new stir within him. Doubt. What is he doing? Kargath growled, his molten eyes watching Ethan's carefree strides toward the final. The confidence in Ethan's casual swagger irked him more than anything else. To Kargath, every move the human made was a violation of centuries of ritual. And yet, despite his utter disregard for tradition, Ethan kept winning. The Venerian elder, who had overseen the gauntlet for millennia, felt his own unease growing. His radiant form flickered under the weight of the tournament's shifting tides. He sent a ripple of thought across the arena. This human, this anomaly, he is unpredictable in ways none of us have ever seen. What does he want? Spectators stared in awe and confusion as Ethan, dressed in his standard Earth workout gear, wandered past competitors who were still suited in ancient ceremonial armor, glowing with energy. He waved absently at the Kile Gareth, who were still warming up in their traditional formations, their hulking forms rippling with tension. Anyone else feel like this is all a bit much? Ethan called out, his voice carrying to those nearby. I mean, all this energy, it's like you guys are trying way too hard. You don't need all the glow and explosions and weird chants. Just fight, right? The Varen, a race of highly disciplined, military-minded beings, muttered to one another in deep tones. This human has no respect for the gauntlet, one of them whispered, its voice laced with disbelief. Does he not realize how many have died trying to reach the finals? He cannot just breeze through it like this. It is impossible. As the final match approached, the officials gathered in hushed corners of the arena. The Corrections, who had been utterly humiliated in the first round, shook their heads in disbelief. We thought we had seen everything, but this, one of them murmured. The semi-final, which would decide Ethan's fate, was set to begin. His opponent? Erath the Conqueror, a battle-hardened Vrethker, known throughout the galaxy for his brutal efficiency in combat. Erath's entire race had been bred for war. He was a master of every weapon and every fighting technique, revered for his brutal efficiency and cold precision. Ethan's nonchalant approach, stretching, yawning, and cracking his knuckles, was a stark contrast to Erath's silent preparation. The Vrethker was a walking storm of focused rage, every movement deliberate and precise. His body was covered in scars from battles across countless planets. The crowd knew he would be ruthless, but even he couldn't predict what was coming next. As the crowd's whispers reached a crescendo, the officials' eyes met with a shared sense of concern. This human wasn't like the others. He had no technique, no armor, no weapons, and yet he had somehow made it this far. Suddenly, the arena lights dimmed and the announcement rang out to the speakers. The semi-final begins now. Ethan Hayes versus Erath the Conqueror. Ethan didn't look the least bit nervous. In fact, he was still fiddling with a toy he had picked up from a nearby vendor on the way to the arena. Some kind of small magnetic sphere that shifted shapes when manipulated. Erath's eyes narrowed, the muscles in his jaw tightening as he prepared to launch himself at the human. As the crowd roared in anticipation, the stakes had never been higher. The galaxy's greatest warriors were beginning to wonder if Ethan Hayes had done something none of them had ever expected. He had taken the gauntlet and turned it into something entirely new. This section builds suspense by highlighting how Ethan's unpredictability continues to defy expectations. The reactions from competitors, spectators, and officials all reflect their growing frustration and confusion, raising the stakes of the final confrontation. Ethan's unconventional approach is starting to challenge established norms and throw the entire tournament into chaos. The final battle was upon them. The arena, once filled with the energy of excitement and disbelief, now lay heavy with tension. The celestial gauntlet had reached its climax, and all eyes were on the two opponents who would define the fate of this tournament. Kargat the Eternal, the master of ancient combat, stood across from Ethan Hayes, the human who had defied every rule, every tradition, the veteran and the wild card, the eternal and the unpredictable. Kargat's massive frame loomed over the arena, his molten skin shimmering with a reddish glow, his eyes burning with the weight of centuries. His ceremonial robes glowed with the insignia of his people, a symbol of tradition and honor. He was prepared, calm, precise. This was his realm. And then there was Ethan, dressed in his Earth workout gear. He stretched, yawned, and checked his phone for notifications. When he finally looked up, he offered a lopsided grin. "You're the big bad, huh? Cool. Just give me a minute. Gotta clear my notifications." Kargatha's fists clenched. "You insult the sacred tradition of this tournament," he growled, his voice like the crackling of fire. "Your unorthodox ways will be your downfall." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, well, I'm all about adaptability," he said casually. "But thanks for the warning. I'll keep that in mind." The gong sounded. The final match had begun. Kargath made the first move. He raised his hand, and with a forceful gesture, he summoned a wave of plasma energy that crashed toward Ethan like a tidal wave of destruction. The crowd gasped. This was Kargatha's signature move, a devastating attack that no opponent had ever survived. But instead of dodging or countering, Ethan did something completely unexpected. He flipped his phone around and pulled up a game app, one of those ancient Earth puzzle games. As the plasma wave roared towards him, Ethan tapped away on his screen as if playing a match 3 game. The crowd was silent, then erupted into laughter. Was this a joke? Ethan grinned, his thumb tapping rapidly. Turns out, multitasking is a real skill, right? He called out, still not looking up. And then, just as the plasma wave was about to engulf him, he swiped the screen of his phone, and somehow, through the impossible chaos, the wave suddenly shifted direction. Kargath watched, stunned, as his own attack veered off course, harmlessly dispersing into the air. Ethan shrugged. What can I say? I work well under pressure, he said with a grin. But Kargath wasn't finished. With a roar of fury, he raised both hands, and the arena around him seemed to warp as he invoked his most devastating technique, the temporal shatter. Time itself began to fracture as Kargath created an intricate, glowing mandala of time loops and overlapping timelines. Each loop represented a moment of total destruction. Time bends to my will, Kargath declared, his voice deep and resonant, his eyes glowing with power. You cannot escape what has already been decided. Ethan blinked and glanced around, his eyes widening at the sight of the shattered timelines. Wait, does this mean I'm stuck in some weird time loop? Ethan asked, scratching his head. Crap, I didn't sign up for this level of complexity. He quickly tapped on his phone again. The crowd gasped as a faint beep echoed across the arena. Ethan smiled. Okay, got it, he said, pulling up a new app, Resonant Frequencies, right? Should work wonders on this mess. With an exaggerated flourish, Ethan pressed a button on his phone, and a metronome sound began pulsing through the air. The tempo was steady, rhythmic, calming even, in sharp contrast to the chaos surrounding them. Kargath sneered. You think your trinket could defeat the power of time? But as the metronome continued to pulse, the temporal mandala began to lose its coherence. The loop started to distort, wobble, and unravel. Kargatha's carefully constructed vision of time itself fell apart, as if a giant cosmic tuning fork had struck it into dissonance. Ethan shrugged nonchalantly. Turns out, resonance works on more than just sound, he said, grinning. The crowd exploded with both laughter and disbelief. The impossible had happened again. The mighty Kargath, who had ruled for centuries, was losing to a human whose methods defied all logic. Kargatha's eyes burned with fury, but also a tinge of realization. This human was adaptable in ways Kargath had never anticipated. You may have won this round, human, Kargath said, his voice a mixture of respect and rage. But I will not let this madness stand. The old ways will always prevail. Ethan stretched and yawned again. Yeah, old ways, traditions, blah, blah, blah. You can keep those for your next tournament. Me? I'm just here for the experience. With a sudden burst of speed, Ethan dove straight into the core of Kargatha's shattered temporal construct, delivering an unexpected low sweep that knocked Kargath off his feet. Kargath stumbled, momentarily disoriented, and Ethan seized the moment. With a fine old playful smirk, Ethan tapped the screen of his phone and flicked a virtual soccer ball into Kargatha's chest, the gesture almost absurd in its simplicity. Kargath tumbled backward, his form crashing to the ground in a heap. The crowd went silent for a heartbeat, then erupted into wild cheers. Against all odds, Ethan Hayes, the human who defied everything, stood victorious. The tournament was over. Chaos had won. In this final showdown, the contrast between Kargatha's traditional, precise methods and Ethan's chaotic adaptability is highlighted. Moment of humor, such as Ethan using a game app and metronome to disrupt Kargatha's attacks, keep the tension high, while also making the audience root for the unpredictable protagonist. The arena was still ringing with the roars of the crowd, but for Ethan Hayes, the chaos had finally quieted. He stood at the center of the now-dimmed stadium, catching his breath, his heartbeat still racing from the epic battle with Kargath the Eternal. He hadn't just won the celestial gauntlet. He had shattered it. Every tradition, every rule, every expectation of what this tournament had been for centuries was now in pieces, swept away by a human's unrelenting adaptability and humor. Kargith, still kneeling on the ground, looked up at Ethan, his eyes not filled with rage, but something deeper, an unsettling respect. Ethan offered a casual wave, his Earth-style grin never fading. Guess it turns out you can break the rules and still win. Who knew? Kargith's voice rumbled in thought. You have done the impossible. You, a human, have broken the game. This tournament was designed to honor tradition, strength, and the supremacy of those who follow the old ways. Yet you have shown that adaptability is far more powerful. The crowd, with a sea of disbelief, now shifted into something else. Curiosity, admiration, whispers filled the air. Ethan hadn't just defeated the greatest warriors. He had changed their very understanding of what combat, what challenge, could be. Ethan smiled, as if the whole thing had been a pleasant stroll in the park. Yeah, maybe it's time. But hey, maybe next year we can keep it a little less intense, huh? The crowd erupted into a mixture of laughter and applause. The celestial gauntlet had been forever altered, not just by Ethan's victory, but by the shift in perspective he had brought to the galaxy. As the stadium lights faded and the distant stars twinkled above, Ethan stood alone in the center, reflecting on everything that had just transpired. He had come here as a mere wild card, an underdog, but now he was something more. He was a symbol of change, of defying what others thought was possible. And for once, the universe wasn't so certain anymore. Adaptability had won, and it would keep winning. This resolution emphasizes a profound impact of Ethan's victory. His unconventional methods disrupt the status quo, inspiring the galaxy to rethink their old ways. The final reflective moment, where he shares his thoughts on rules and opportunities, leaves a lasting impression on both the characters and the audience. As the stadium cleared and the galaxy's greatest warriors began to process what had just happened, Ethan stood alone in the center of the arena, his mind already drifting toward the next challenge. The crowd had seen him break the rules, but what they didn't know was that Ethan wasn't done. The galaxy had changed. He made sure of it, but Earth? Earth hadn't even begun to show what it could do. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. He glanced at it, then smirked. We're next. Earth's turn to shake things up. Ready? Ethan pocketed the phone, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Always, he muttered to himself. Far beyond the stadium, in the towering citadels of the galactic elite, officials were already discussing the implications of the human that had thrown everything they knew into chaos. A new, unpredictable force was rising, and it wasn't just Ethan Hayes. It was an entire species, hungry for change, for the freedom to break the old patterns. Send more humans. A voice echoed in the halls of the council as a new chapter began. Across the galaxy, institutions quiver at the thought of what Earth's greatest minds might now have in store. Teaser for the future. Ethan's victory has sent ripples across the universe, and as his story spreads, others are starting to see the potential for Earth's unorthodox brilliance. As the galaxy braces for the unexpected, one thing is certain. Humanity has just started to play the game. The ending leaves the audience hungry for more, hinting at future galactic adventures, while implying that the human race may become a disruptive force in ways the galaxy hasn't even imagined yet.